Welcome back to West Texas View.
Welcome back to the West Texas View. Dr. Bobby James, psychiatrist with the Texas Tech Health Science Center. He teaches in the medical school, but he also has a practice in the Texas Tech Physicians Clinic, both in Midland and Odessa. And we were talking just before the break about a study that had just been completed by the Center of Disease Control that showed an enormous population that had or were suffering from mental illness. And before we leave that subject, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, this was a very comprehensive study. Some of the statistics and figures are so staggering, it's mind-blowing. Some of them I would like to share with you. As we probably know, there is a direct connection between suicidal thoughts and suicidal behavior, even suicide attempts with mental illness. And also there's a huge component, this huge correlation between substance abuse, any form of substance abuse, and mental illness. They both feed on each other in the sense that the mental illness can lead to substance abuse problems. Substance abuse problems can lead to mental illness. It's both ways. So yeah, so there's always feeding on each other. The statistics show that in the year 2009, 5% of the U.S. population, 5%, that translates into almost 11 million people, had severe substance abuse related problems.
That's a huge statistic.
5% of the population. That's mental illness, and they had comorbid mental illness along with substance abuse problems. About 8.4 million Americans in the past year had suicidal thoughts. About 2.2 million made plans to kill themselves, and about 1 million actually went on to attempt suicide. Again, suicide is still a very, depending on the age group, still almost always top 5, one of the top 5 reasons of mortality in a different population. For example, in younger groups, like between 15 to 25 year age group, accidents is still the #1 cause. Homicide in certain ethnic groups, but suicide is the third one.
The third cause of death.
In younger population. In older population, particularly I'm talking about in Caucasian, older Caucasians, senior citizens 18 and above, suicide is the #1 cause of, the highest rates of suicide is seen in that age population.
So, and since I'm in that age population and get the AARP magazine, I had just read an article about that and how, and particularly for males, that this was a growing problem.
It's a growing problem. What I can show you, in fact, recently there have been spurts of suicides, and I wanted to touch base with you about that in adolescent population in this Permian Basin area. And this is a national trend. A couple of things happen when an adolescent commits a suicide. There are a lot of copycat suicide happens. So you usually see clusters of suicide happening. One person, for whatever reason, commits suicide, and on top of that, very close to that, number of suicides happen. And one of the
maybe not even in the same school.
Maybe not in the same school, but just hearing about them. So what really happens is, there are guidelines from American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry how to deal with suicide in a school setting, just to make sure that such copycat suicides do not happen. One of the reasons is that these copycat suicides are the folks who commit these things. They do have a very high rate of mental illness, mostly depression. At the same time, they find an outlet. They are so filled up with their anguish and despair.
It's an escape route.
It's an escape route. And
somebody else did it, so it's okay.
And they find, okay, oh my God, this can be done. So it's a plausibility they explore. Secondly, the person who has died gets a lot of glorification, a lot of attention. Everybody talks good things about him or her. And that's something is very attractive to these folks who are usually very isolated, they're depressed, not doing well in school, not doing interpersonal relationship issues. So those are the factors, and I would say, again, together with alienation from the adults, particularly their parents, play a major factor. There are a number of factors also contribute to that, but these are the major factors that that cause the spurts of suicide that we see coming in a very close succession after one incident happens. So,
and one of the at a teenage seminar I attended recently, and they were talking about this, and one of the students said that there had been a suicide in their school, and that everybody talked about what they should have done, and they should have recognized these symptoms, and said that one of the other students that was later said, I almost committed suicide after that, said it was because that they thought, well, I could make some changes if I keep calling attention to the fact that in this case bullying was part of the reason. There are specific guidelines into how to handle these kind of cases on a school basis. Maybe we should talk some more about it if we have some time about it. First of all, it's difficult to do suicide prevention training to all the children. What is recommended is that teachers, counselors, coaches, whoever are in touch with the children, identify children who are struggling with behavior, sudden drop in school grades, sudden drop in relating with other kids. So some changes that you see in kids who are susceptible to having mood problems, which is usually reflected in children as getting irritable, poor performance. Or just seem sad all the time.
Or seem to be sad, or just not by themselves, being distracted easily, which is not like them. Those will be the kids, should be the ones who should get more attention to them. Not necessarily, it's a myth saying that, that if you talk about suicide to kids, you are implanting the thought of suicide, and that's
already been implanted.
Right. Well, if a person who's not suicidal, no matter how much you talk about suicide, will not cause him to commit suicide.
That's right.
And also, it's a myth, as I said, that a person who has already thought about it is actually desperately seeking some help. So talking about suicide brings the things open. And discussing about things makes much better for the child to feel understood, being related to things, not be so isolated, particularly from the adult community.
But are you encouraged by the way teachers and administrators in the schools are embracing trying to learn more and be led? Or?
Yeah, well, I'm not in the loop with what the
in-service education
is happening. But I recall that there has been a major meeting conducted by these independent school districts. I think it was called at the highest level. I think that's a very good right step.
We're going to have to take another break right now. We'll be back in just a minute and continue this conversation with Dr. Bobby Jane.
Stay tuned. West Texas View will be right back.